All right, are we live? Looks like it. Hey, hello everyone. I'm Jay Isles from UFO Press, lead creative director, publisher, writer, layout artist, etc. Not to say that I do everything there. I would be nowhere without my incredibly valid and valuable stable of writers, particularly Douglas Santana Mota, co-author of Legacy Second Edition, and all the artists and creatives that have helped us get here. So the Gauntlet has been obviously a big part of my success as a independent designer. It's been things like Lowell's playthroughs of Legacy First Edition that really sort of gave me the impetus to continue designing and continue making things after that game came out, and well, had things that I wanted to improve upon. And then as I was getting second edition off the ground, again, Lowell really came through for me and played a series of really fun to listen to playtests that helped things go. And it's been a great place for me to talk about design. So I thought I would come here and discuss what's next for UFO Press. So there's one big thing that we're doing next is continuing the Legacy line. Now, a while back, we had a Kickstarter for a bunch of new books for the line, taking on the post-apocalyptic, slightly weird and twisted worlds of Legacy and expanding upon them. These are something that had been proposed originally for the second edition Kickstarter. But as we worked through the issues of fulfilling a game that was a lot more popular than we'd expected it would be, we ended up having to devote resources and budget elsewhere. So at the start of this year, we ran a Kickstarter for 3 new books. There was Legacy, The Engine of Life, a game about a book about adding life and rebirth and new growth to the world. There was sorry, just picking up some props. There was Legacy Endgame, which you see displayed on screens at the moment, a game about a final end. The apocalypse has come and you survive that, but things are worse and things are getting worse. And the question is, what will your characters and what will your factions do to try and fight against that? And finally, there was Free from the Yoke, a game of post-colonial politics in an Eastern European, in a setting drawing on Eastern European myth and history. So we ran that Kickstarter for them at the start of this year. It was really successful. We managed to unlock a really high quality production run for those books, as well as extra stretch goals to add on to things and help us make the books as beautiful as they could be. Now, those have all been fulfilled to customers, and we've been sending books around the world to fulfill and to stock at shops. Now, Engine of Life was released a few months back, Free from the Yoke alongside it, and we've been really happy with the response we've seen to those two. And now the as time is ticking on, we are releasing Endgame, the final book in the trifecta. Endgame is another book I'm very proud of. It's got beautiful art, as always, from Tithi Luadthong. It's got all sorts of interesting new playbooks to add to Legacy. You can play the secret agents who tried to stop the apocalypse and failed, and are now trying to rebuild their honor and their sense as an organization by quashing the things that caused the apocalypse as they threaten to make the world even worse. You can play the Ascendant Afflicted, infected people shambling through life and trying to deal with the disease that afflicts them, and try and defend their culture even as they do so. Because, there have been generations since the apocalypse, and even a zombie horde can develop cultural traditions and ways of being and find value and worth in their life. We have the bonded pack, people who have formed a bond with animals and the strange creatures of this new world and can work alongside them always. And a particular favorite, the Deathless Elite, who are a whole organization of the 1%, the elite of the world before the apocalypse, who have managed to cling on to life in their impregnable fortress. But the things that they have done to make themselves immortal, the things that they have done to make themselves survive, weigh heavily upon them. And now they need to work out how they will relate to the rest of the world outside. Their fortress cannot last forever. And even if it does, is it worth staying in stasis for that long? The rest of the world might move on without them. But of course, with Legacy's big deal of playing characters and families, there's a bunch of new characters for you to play in here as well. First up, there's the Foundling, a character raised by, monsters, wolves, whatever. They're pulled in two different directions between the family that eventually took them in after their strange childhood and the tribe that raised them, whether that is aliens or monsters or animals or just another group of people. There's the Hellion, who is an incredible psychic who can summon monsters and use a sort of strange powers to twist reality. But they are just a child in the end, and a child that might be exploited and used by other groups for their powers. Think basically, if you wanted to play 11 in Stranger Things, this is your chance. There's the Herald, who was our riff on sort of Unknown Armies mechanics of the avatar system in Unknown Armies, where as you draw on cultural touchstones, you get more and more powerful. The Herald is that, but for artifacts of the world before. They're a person who seeks out all sorts of elements of pop culture, of the world that there used to be. And as they accumulate more and more of these, and as they bring more people into their story, getting them to play roles of important cultural roles in these stories, they get more and more powerful. But obviously there's an issue in that the stories of the world before are not necessarily in line with the world as it is now. And if you submerge yourself too deeply in them, you might become, a creature at odds with the things your family needs to succeed. Yeah, so I'm suggesting using the bonded pack to play post-apocalyptic Pokemon trainers. That would be excellent. I love the idea. Another nice thing about the Hellion is that they're a really nice counterpart to a playbook in Engine of Life, the Prodigy, who is a sort of, who is more just like a really smart kid, a sort of preternaturally smart kid, sort of like your, Franklin Richards in the Fantastic Four, or your Ender. We actually ended the story behind there being two of these sort of semi-psychic kids, is that back as part of the Kickstarter, we allowed backers to pledge at a certain level to get custom playbooks made, and the backer wanted a sort of psychic kid sort of playbook. We ended up making the Hellion, and they didn't complain so much as say, I was looking for something a bit more positive, a bit more upbeat. And so we ended up just making two of them, and they fitted nicely into the two books. Let's see, there's the Martyr, who is very fitting for Endgame. They're a character who draws more and more power the more and more they put themselves through. They use this to, I mean, unlike a lot of other playbooks, they are centered around the harm track in the game. In fact, they have 2 harm tracks, one for their mind and one for their body. The more that they mark on each one, the better the other one gets. And their stats are specifically keyed off how many boxes they have marked in each track. It's a really interesting playbook, and it's, you need to work to push yourself as much as possible without pushing yourself too far. I really like it. And obviously, with Legacy, if a character dies, it's not the end of the world, because then you get to make your death move, leave a legacy behind for your family, create a new character, all that sort of thing. So they really also play into that sort of burn fast and burn bright sort of philosophy we have for making characters for this game. We've got the Road Warrior, which is, I think the playing the Road Warrior section in this just talks about, you know what this is. It's Mad Max. Play it. And I really love them. I really like the mechanic that Douglas made up for these, where so obviously the Road Warrior is a playbook about being someone with an awesome vehicle. It's also a playbook about being a drifter who comes into a place with a sort of mysterious past, and the more that they what's the word? And the more that they reveal about themselves, the more things get tense and the more real things are and the more effective they are. So Douglas thought up this mechanic for one of their moves where whenever you're in a chase, you can choose to evoke a flashback to something previous, some other memory of battle and loss. And in doing so, you can add a complication to whoever's chasing you or who you're pursuing. And once you have evoked enough memories, you can decide, you have narrative authority over where and when the chase will end, which is really cool. And yeah, as someone suggested, when you're not in the sort of mechanical families, it's really fun. Like, yeah, on the bonded pack, you can be a Road Warrior. If you were, what would be a good one? You could be a Road Warrior from the Cultivators of New Flesh, to have some sort of weird mutant animal that is your particular ride. Obviously, or like the Pioneers of the Depths, so that you have a hovercraft or boat, all sorts of things. And finally, in terms of the new character options, there's the Warlock, who is, well, all about reaching out to the powers and creatures that lurk out there in the night and in the darkness and in these strange spaces, the places where the world becomes weak and you can step through to other places, dark realms. So the Warlock is very much about transgression, about walking in the darkness, about stepping between shadows. If you're playing with this playbook, you are saying to the group that there are wounds in the world where strange things lurk. There are places where monsters roam and find their home, and you can go to those places and you can make friends with those monsters and you can strike deals with them, and they're very cool. For one thing, one particular little twist that I really love with them is that they don't have a death box on their harm track. They have a sequestered box, because when they mark that, they are pulled out of this world. Their grip on this world slips and they are locked away in their own personal nightmare realm. But everyone who died in the same scene where they marked their sequestered box ends up in that box too. And maybe they can work together to escape. And just the thought of that is like real cool. Oh, which reminds me that when I was looking through the families, I skipped a final one. I think. Yes. I skipped a few of them actually. The Eldritch Servants. There we go. The ones that we sort of designed to key off the Warlock. So the Eldritch Servants are the remnants of people who summoned whatever it was that caused the apocalypse. If you want to be cultists of the aliens or of Cthulhu or of whatever else, this is your playbook. Yes, you can select whether your masters were behemoth gods older than time, monstrous species from the world's secret places, or dark forces from the void between stars. And this one, actually, you have all sorts of things to sort of break reality in some ways and weaken it and put these soft places down. You can generate strange... So the family system for Legacy is based around gathering surpluses and measuring them against your needs. And for most people, these are quite standard things like trade goods or medicine or recruits or, the sort of things that your standard post-apocalyptic community needs. The Eldritch Servants twist that a little. They can perform rituals to summon other surpluses into being, things like faith or pride or mirage or echoes or wealth. And these are strange things that will help their family prosper in the post-apocalyptic world, but will twist whoever is holding them, even if they're traded away or what have you. And they can even do things like summon an endless city from beyond reality, causing it to manifest in different places across your map and walk between them. I think when he was writing this one, Douglas was tapping a bit into Don't Rest Your Head, because there's a lot of that sort of flavour to it for the Mad City. And I'm a fan. Yes. And the thing is that, like, obviously everything in this book is completely compatible with everything in the core book or in the Engine of Life. So you can make all sorts of weird and interesting combinations. Like, let me think. A warlock, for example, from the Serene Choir, who are the family in Engine of Life who used to be servants of some sort of higher power, and like they used to follow this power's will, and now that it's gone with the apocalypse and all, they have to work out what they should do and how to be moral people and that sort of thing. So playing one of those who has flipped over to seeking out the dark places of the world and the monsters that live in them, that could be a really fun character. Or the coalition, who is made of multiple families shoved together. Obviously, that's a playbook entirely about combinations, and you could go really interesting with some of the things in here. Yeah. Ooh. And I mustn't forget, of course, the general rules tweaks that we put in this. A lot of these are very much toolbox, very optional. You can drop them into your game if you like. For example, there's the traitor role, which is an extra role your characters can take on. In Legacy, as you mark more and more roles for your characters, you go through, in the core book, leader or agent or rebel or outsider, your character advances and gets more experienced, and you have more and more effects on the fictional landscape of the game. And Engine of Life added the prophet role, where your character manages to see the bigger picture or a greater sense of what's going on. And in the Engine of Life, you have the traitor, which gives your character incentives to turn on their family, to turn on broader homeland society. And in some cases, maybe it's all for the best. In some cases. There's rules for nightmares, which are ways of combining multiple threats that you made at character creation into a single monolithic horror that will really define your game. There's rules for the Doom Clock, which is essentially, it's a lot like a clock in Blades in the Dark or what have you, counting down to something bad, but it's that on steroids. It's really keyed into the family move system and showing that every time you're spending your family's time and energy on something, the apocalypse or end point is coming soon. And finally, there's rules for making the relationship between families more tense, making treaties more nefarious and causing trouble even when you try and call on your allies for help. See, we've got, as we've done in both these books, we've got a bunch of essays. We have Kira McGran talking about the horror of isolation, because Legacy is a game about families and about society, and a lot of interesting things happen when someone is cut off from that, or the people who reject that, or the ways in which they might be rejected from that. So that's cool. We got Slade Stolar talking about tragedy and how to help structure your story so that it's tragic but also enjoyable. We've got Arthur Pinto de Andrade, which I probably mispronounced, who was one of the core playtesters of Legacy 2nd Edition, talking about synergy and creative playing. And we've got Norman Rafferty talking about strategy as you play. And finally, rounding out the book, we've got a set of wonders. Because Legacy, after all, isn't about the status quo. It's about changing things over time. And so we have a few interesting things you can do. Your family can devote their resources to overcoming this, that, or the other. We have the Tartarus site, which is a place that you can build to trap something that cannot be defeated but can be contained. This one was another backer creation, and it was, for them, inspired by nuclear waste sites and the way that the iconography around those is designed so that if people in a post-apocalyptic society who don't understand any of our alphabets or what have you might understand that this is a dangerous place that you should not dig into. So that is a way that you can build up all sorts of things to trap a rampaging titan or a melting down reactor or whatever else is threatening you. There's the Watchtower, which is a grand structure that can keep an eye on the various threats assailing your homeland and link you together in a web of connections. But the downsides of that is it can link you into a surveillance network or fail you when you grow to depend on it. There's the Race to the Stars, which is a really, really interesting one because it completely transforms your game. Once someone's built this, you go from being a post-apocalyptic society on a single place to spreading out across the local solar system. And the way that, which is a huge jump, but I'm so happy that it's a game that can allow for that. And that is entirely defined by how many wonders have already been created so far in the game. It's very much an end game wonder. I think very much inspired by the rocket building in Civilization. Finally, we have the Crucible, where you completely remake another family or your own family. If someone's playing the uplifted animals and wants to become more human, you can do that. If someone has been playing God with biology and mutating their creatures and wants to mutate themselves too, they can do that. If you have a society of robots who wants to become more cyborg or fleshy, that's on the cards. That's very cool. And finally, at the end, we've got another quick start adventure to help you play through some of the stuff in the game. Talking about a doomed expedition on a hellish planetoid that is filled with monsters, and the people have to, explore this place, try and survive, make friends with the other races that have been trapped here over time, and work out what the secrets of this place are. It's very cool. So that's what's up with Legacy at the moment. And calling this one Endgame is, in many ways, more broadly applicable in that this is actually the last supplement we currently have planned for the Legacy system. But that doesn't mean that it's over, the next thing we're trying to do is the Worlds of Legacy. So we've already released some of books ourselves using this branding. Godsend, Rhapsody of Blood, Free from the Oak itself. But what we want to do is put this out into the general public's hands, a lot like Forged in the Dark ended up doing. We're putting together a website that has details on how to hack the game, details on what makes a legacy game, a basic skeleton of the rules that you can key off of, and a license, or rather a set of terms that people will be able to use the branding and the title and all that sort of thing. Because as I've been going through this process, making the Legacy Second Edition and all the games that span off that, there were so many people sort of proposing ideas like, you could do a cyberpunk legacy game, or you could do a Dune-inspired legacy game with noble houses in space, or, there's so many possibilities. And I really wanted to make sure that there was that structure there for people to take it and run with it. Because, I don't want to keep it to myself. Throughout this whole process, through going from Legacy First Edition to Second Edition and everything since then, what's been really exciting is seeing what other people have done with it. And, to start off with, that was Douglas, writing to me, he was a complete stranger at the time, writing to me from Brazil and saying that, I really like Legacy. Do you have any more plans for it? I've wrote this whole supplement about playing monsters and weird creatures. And from there, I started working with him and published that supplement. And then we worked together on making Legacy Second Edition. And then I got, 6 other authors coming up. No, wait, 5 other authors coming up to help make the other Worlds of Legacy games with me. And backers, backing at custom content levels where they'll be able to make their own things with us. And it's just been so exciting seeing other people's interpretations of the setup or acting on the setup. And, I wanted to make sure that continued. So that's what Worlds of Legacy is. And hopefully we'll have this whole thing set up by the end of the year. Obviously got with myself as the only sort of full-time UFO press person, there's a lot of balls being juggled, but this is something that I really want to get out there and in people's hands. Oh, speaking of in people's hands, I didn't mention that Endgame is out very soon. It is releasing on Halloween, 31st of October. And that's the point where people who didn't back the Kickstarter will be able to buy the PDF on DriveThruRPG, will be able to buy the book from Modifius and from my own website. And we're trying to get it into shops at the moment. So that's very exciting. So that's Legacy. That's the thing that has really sort of been defining my game design for the past 3 or 4 years. Finally coming to not an end, but I can sort of release it out there. What's next is what I'm working on at the moment, which is this nice little book called Void Heart Symphony. Now, when I was making games for Legacy, there was one in particular that Maria at the Gauntlet, Thuban, suggested that I make a game based on Castlevania and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and all that sort of thing. And that ended up spinning out into Rhapsody of Blood, which was just a really exciting game to make. And I really enjoyed running that for the Gauntlet and playtesting that. And, it's something I'm still very proud of. I think it's combat dynamics are just really fun, and it presents that sort of dungeoneering, cinematic action thing in a way that I don't think any other PBTA games really do. But it's a little, I'm not going to say shoddy, it's a little creaky. It was a game where sort of size constraints for the print run meant that I had to pack an entire standalone game into something like this size, which doesn't leave a huge amount for rules, explanations, or flexibility for long-term play, or just all things to make it a really great and dynamic game. So I was thinking about revising it and thinking about what I wanted to do from that. And I realized that what was really attracting me, what was really calling to me, was taking those basic systems and putting them in a different setting. Because the Castlevania Bloodborne Explore 'em Up is great, but it's not really what was sort of interesting me at the moment. And coming off of playing games like Persona 5 and such that had this really sort of social awareness and real world setting, I wanted to do something based on that. So that was the origin of Void Heart Symphony. So in Void Heart Symphony, you are a group of mundane heroes who have noticed that the world around them is being twisted, is being corrupted by this extra dimensional force of darkness, this castle, this labyrinth, this nightmare realm. It is seeking out the predators and bastards and bullies and tyrants that fill your modern city and empowering them, encouraging them. And you're the people who have realized that all this is happening and have decided to do something about it. So the game unfolds in the balance between two different spheres. In the mundane world, you might be a convenience store clerk or a professor at a university or a crusading journalist or whatever else. And you're spending your free time, anything you can eke out, to seek out these people who are using the castle's power for darkness and spreading suffering. You're trying to work out what it is that they're doing and where in the mundane world the castle has manifested to latch onto them. Then you're getting together and diving into that darkness, forming incredible, gaining incredible powers as you draw on the abilities of as you draw on the darkness of the castle, and as you draw on the relationships you have with others. Because one of the cool things that that really appeals to me about Void Heart Symphony is the way that I'm changing up the playbook dynamic for PBTA games. So obviously, this is not something that's new to me. Legacy had the whole thing of having two playbooks, one for your faction and one for your character. In Void Heart, instead, you have one playbook that's for your character, and it's double-sided, so it's got one part for your mundane life and one half for the castle side of things. But you also have covenants. These are particular relationships that you have with people in your life. Maybe with the Hierophant, a spiritual leader, or with the Empress, someone who's nurturing you and protecting you and helping you grow. And as you can see, these are fancy little cards, but on the other side, they have all the rules that you need for them, including information about who this person tends to be, ways in which you can tend to promote this relationship, ways in which you might harm this relationship, and particular moves that you have as long as this relationship is strong. So as you're playing, you'll have your playbook in front of you, but you'll also have maybe you have at least one of these cards and probably two or three others as you go. And I've been finding that really fun in playtests, ways that you can sort of unlock this power, and your character is very in a very real way defined by the people that they know, the people who care about them and who they care about. And as I've continued designing it, that has those relationships have become sort of crucial to the overall flow of the game, because it's a game about revolution in some ways. It's a game about fighting against the darkness in society, because you can charge into the dark heart of a manipulative doctor and wreck his shadow laboratory and face down this ghoulish doppelganger of him who is leaping about injecting poison into your veins, that sort of thing. You can defeat that, that's fine. But the castle will find more vassals. The castle will find new people to encourage. And it's about instead creating using that power that you're gaining from that to create a movement, to create a real change in the world that can push the castle out of your city and make this place a better place. So as part of that, there are two special covenants in the game. There's the world and the void. The world represents how much your character is in tune to the city around them, how much they understand the concerns of the people who are getting impacted by their actions, how well they are checking in with other people and sharing power with them, and making sure that everything is cool. The void represents how much the darkness of the castle is going to your head in some ways. The more of the void covenant you are, the more you have, the more you're tempted. Because, as I say, the void empowers and encourages. It doesn't make people do dark things or cause suffering. It just gives them the tools to if they want to. So, as you use the castle's power, as you express your domination over the castle's vassals through defeating them, you naturally gain more of this that you'll have to push against. It's all about not just taking down bad individuals, but building community and structural change. Exactly. So the nice thing about the Void Covenant is it's all optional. Like, to start with, you can choose not to hold on to the darkness within you, even as you sort of vent it out for supernatural power in the mundane world. And you gain the ability to use that to stop someone worrying about guilt or obligations or propriety. Just empower someone around you to do what they want, unfettered by society's rules. As it gets stronger in you, you get encouraged to build hierarchies in your group. When someone accepts that they're superior, you can use a move of theirs as much as you like, so long as they never question your authority. If they ever disobey or betray you, you have to punish them, or else you lose that ability forever. And finally, when it's strongest within you, you can, for one thing, you don't need to die. So long as another character is within arm's reach of you, whenever you would take your final box of harm, you can say that they suffer it instead. That's nice, isn't it? And you gain abilities to stop all impediments to your freedom, any shackles or restrictions on you. And you gain the ability to create minions in the mundane world, creatures of void and shadow. So it's, obviously, real talk. I don't want characters who give in to the darkness, who give in to the encouragement of the void. I won't put this here because there's been a lot of movements over the past decades, people forming organizations that are trying to push back against the various and many awful things that exist in our world. And often there's a real struggle when the people who first get picked up by those by the press and made figureheads for the movement become emblematic of it and stop seeing it as a sort of communal thing, but as their own personal trip to success. So in Void Heart, that's the question really, is will you build a movement that continues to be reflective of the people on the ground, that continues to check your egos and remind you of why you're doing all this? Or will you basically, it's a question of, are you overthrowing the king so that you can become the new king, or are you overthrowing the king to create a whole new system? And I'm just really excited to see how that ends up. Obviously, the game is still in development. There's a lot of things still to punch up. The mundane world investigation side is something that I'm still working on here and there. I'm really, really happy with how the Castle Shard combat side of things is working now. That's consistently creating really dramatic and interesting fights that I'm enjoying a lot. The game is, of course, currently on Kickstarter. And fully funded, and we're currently working towards new playbook stretch goal, because the playbooks in this game are at present things like the authority or the heretic or the provider or the inhuman, things that define like what role you play in the resistance. Well, not so much the inhuman's a creature spawned by the void, turned against it, and gets to work out what sort of form that takes, whether they're a possessing ghost or a doppelganger creature or a animal that has gained some sentience, that sort of thing. That's fun. What we're working towards at the moment is the Trapped, a rebel playbook for someone who tried to cross over into the void to fight it, probably, and could not leave, could not get back. And now they're there full time. And so when the other rebels are doing things in the mundane world, the Trapped is haunting one of them, following them insubstantially or riding around in the back of their head or some other things. And so they get to define how they manifest in the mundane world and what that costs the person who's carrying them and how that benefits the person that's carrying them. And yeah, what we're looking at is designing these extra playbooks with an eye to switching between them as you play, because I really love the change to another playbook advance in a lot of PBTA games, and I haven't been able to really delve into that very much. So looking into that here. So that's Void Symphony on Kickstarter at the moment. Go and check it out if you're interested. Then there's the other game that we are in active development at the moment, Miss Thayer Legends from the Borderlands. Miss Thayer is a game of sort of crystal punk geomantic fantasy. This was kickstarted last year, I want to say. And this is what Douglas has been doing while I've been designing Void Heart Symphony, essentially. This is another adaptation of Legacy's systems to another setting, and we are really definitely adapting it to the setting. It's so Miss Thayer is a world based on a board game from an Italian publisher. It's a game where long ago, a huge shard of crystal smashed into this planet, completely changing its weather and its storms and lifting your own lifting the land you live on up as a floating continent into the now mist-filled skies. And yeah, someone in the chat saying, "Hey, yeah, Miss Thayer news after all." Yeah, I wasn't going to forget it. And then, after the sort of turbulent storms had died down, people started exploring this new world that they were on, realizing that these crystals that had permeated everything had given them new powers, ways to unlock the crystals and use them and exploit them. Miss Thayer focuses on a very particular period in this setting's timeline, in about 30-year span, where this whole floating continent is taken up by two great empires that are at war. You are people in a city that has recently been captured by one of these this king, has been captured by one of the great powers from the other. You define the city as it's a legacy game after all. It starts with building maps and drawing interesting things. You are the movers and shakers in this city, but you get to define who they are. Maybe you are a vassal guild of one of the kingdom that has conquered this place. It's cadre of soldiers or scientists or priests. Maybe you're one of the local factions, whether that's like the political ideology that used to rule here before it was captured, or whether that's a cell of the other empire that's been abandoned here when the main forces retreated. Maybe you are one of the factions from elsewhere in the Borderlands, followers of the strange inhuman others that stalk the Borderlands, hunters of the monsters that ruined your city, traders, ferrying crystals that carry dreams. And all of these factions are grounded in the setting. I was talking to someone about this today, and we were talking about how a lot of PBTA games are quite generic in some ways with their playbooks, like, archetypal. And the tack we're taking with Miss There is that, we really want to evoke the setting in all of the playbooks. We were talking about how in Night Witches, so much of the mechanics and the playbooks are rooted in specific things in that setting and in that context and in that time period. And we were thinking how much we can do with that to evoke the setting and time period and interesting things of Miss There. And I'm very excited to see how it's coming along. As I say, Douglas has been very hard at work making this. He's currently working on champion rules, because one of the things with Miss There is it has the legacy thing where you have families, well, you have houses and you have heroes. And heroes are agents of the houses. They go about and do things in the world for them. They serve their orders until they become a champion. And then they become free agents. They become creatures of influence in their own right. And in some ways, they get to transition from the character layer to the faction layer, just as individuals, and make an impact there. And it's a really cool way of playing around with it. We've also got a lot of other character playbooks that we are just finishing up playtest and just need me really to put them through layout to send them out to backers. So expect a Miss There backer update in the next week or so with a whole raft of about, I think it's at least 10 new house and character playbooks that you'll be able to play with, along with a bunch of updates for old ones, as well as art. One of the really cool things, getting art is my favorite thing about being a game designer. And I've been really enjoying what we're doing with Miss There. We ran into a bit of a stumbling block as we were planning this Kickstarter, in that the artist for the board game, Travis Anderson, had overcommitted himself and had to deal with carpal tunnel syndrome and was basically unable to give us much more art than we wanted for the Kickstarter. But he nominated a friend of his, someone he knew, Erin Arick, who has been extremely good for this. You can see here the piece of art for the Veteran, one of our playbooks, who is all about having been through so many things and survived so many things and having the full backing of their guild behind them. And I just love the majesty in this piece. Oh, and actually, like half an hour before before I started this presentation, I got another piece from him, and I'm just looking that out now. Yeah. So this is the art piece for the Warden, which is the playbook all about community, about forming bonds between people, about understanding others' hearts, and drawing on all the people who you have connected in the past. And yeah, that's a good piece of art, eh? Actually, I want to see if I can find some other ones. Yeah, my new illustrations folder. So let's see. We've got the firebrand, who is the political agitator. We've got the tower, which is a political, which is one of the houses that is based around, it's a mysterious structure out there in the wasteland. And there's this faction that gathers crystals from across the wasteland and from across the borderlands and brings them there and instills them with dreams and memories and takes them back and sells them to people. And they're sort of a little bit archaeologist, a little bit mystic, a little bit drug peddlers. Really cool. And I love this picture because it's got this sense of this strange structure just standing alone in the borderlands. And yeah, we've got the martyr, who is a version of the same playbook in Legacy, honestly, but this tapping into the emotional magic of Mysthair, because the crystal magic that the whole setting runs on is in many ways based on emotion and bonds and being able to express yourself in that way. And someone who is very much in tune with their own experiences, even though if those experiences are suffering and nastiness, can do all sorts of wonders with that. It's actually one of the things that we've been particularly interested in fleshing out with this setting, like, because if we're talking about war and if we're talking about revolution and resistance and rebuilding cities and that sort of thing, it presents real different dynamics where, like, technology isn't the thing that makes people important or dangerous or effective. It's bonds and community and strength, the strength of those bonds with each other. And that is just really exciting. Yeah, so that's Mysthair. There'll be new version of that releasing, as I say, hopefully next week. And we are very much on track for a March release for this. And I'm really looking forward to that. Let's see, that's all the big projects that are on our slate at the moment. And we have a few other things that we're working on. Let's see. So Transmission Burst, Volume 1 was a collection of 12 of my micro games, all sorts of little things that are playable in one session. There were sort of GM'd and GM-less games, dice-based games, card-based games, tarot-based games, dice-based games, all that sort of thing. I'm now putting together a second volume of those because I've got 12 more micro games to put together. And so I'm looking forward to setting that up on Drive-Thru-RPG as a print anthology to go with the other book. There's Ghost Ship, which I've been working on for a while now, on and off, but it's sort of lain fallow for about a year. That's a game about people whose minds were scanned and uploaded and reactivated after the original's death to serve as a sort of final testament or as a sort of preservation of that person's experiences, as a historical document, that sort of thing. But these people, these minds, finding themselves rotting away in digital retirement homes, escaping to the stars, where their skills, in that they can fit on a computer chip and have incredible reaction time and don't need life support, make them perfect for charting new ships, new exploration of space. So it's a game about space travel. It's about going into the dark. It's about deciding whether you hold on to the person you used to be or become something new. And it's about seeing how society changes as you go on these decade or century or millennia long trips between the stars. And that had sort of, so Ghost Ship is a concept that's really sort of quite dear to me, but it's something that, as I said, lain fallow for a bit because I didn't really understand where I was going with it. But I have a few notes now. I have a few ideas that, like, there are bits of it that I wrote that I wasn't really sure where I was going with. And now that well, the past year has kind of been quite interesting for me and brought a lot of things more into focus. And the game makes a lot more sense to me now. So I'm looking forward to getting back to it. There's future legacy hacks. I'm not ruling out that I'll go back to that well or help other people consult on their designs if someone has a really sort of promising Worlds of Legacy concept but asks for help putting it together or publishing it or what have you. I suppose in a similar role to what Evil Hat have ended up doing with some Forge in the Dark games. And finally, the last thing that's sort of occupying a bit of time in my mind is this is a pretty rubbish title, but Requiem of Shadows is like a third game in the Rhapsody of Blood, Void Heart Symphony sort of series. Because I've been wanting to make a sort of dark sci-fi game for a while. Drawing on Mass Effect and Metroid and all these sort of things. And this is, it's all very speculative, but it's an idea of taking the various systems that especially the castle systems that I've laid down in Rhapsody and then Void Heart, and putting them in a sci-fi setting, but also in amongst the darkness. Because there's been this theme of the darkness throughout those. In Rhapsody of Blood, the castle came out of the void and was just this gothic structure that you raided. In Persona, it's a pervasive thing that's infiltrating and infecting society and drawing it to entropy that you're fighting against. And in this one, the game will take place within the void. The game will take place within that space, that darkness. And maybe it completed its goal of consuming the world, or maybe it's just that you're isolated within it. But you are people trapped in this void, and you're barely people anymore. You've got the core of who you are, but it's difficult to get a sense of that. It's difficult to define yourself. And you are adventuring in amongst the sort of fragments of realities that have been digested by the void, encountering new people and new places, and sort of seeking out aspects of solidity, aspects of core emotional attachment that help you define who you are. So it's sort of like assembling yourself as you go, of finding certainty as you see yourself through others' eyes, that sort of thing. It's really cool. And like, this is how I'm sort of thinking of incorporating elements like the Metroid accumulation of power-ups, or even I guess the sort of Mega Man shaping of who you are depending on like the things that you've overcome. And maybe a bit of that sort of Undertale sense of like the heart and who you are really at the core, and being in a dark and monstrous place, but finding the beauty and community that's still there. So anyway, that is very much on the horizon, but what I have going through my head at the moment. So thank you everyone for watching. This has been a really great presentation. Does anyone have, sorry, it's not really for me to say that it's been a great presentation, but it's been great fun talking to you all. Does anyone have any final questions before I close out? Yeah, Hollow Knight is definitely another touchstone for this, now I think about it. Thank you, Alexa. All right. Well, that's everything. Thank you. You've been a great audience. This is what's coming up from UFO Press. Thank you very much.